Hello. The history of Games Workshop and Warhammer is an endlessly fascinating one, and whether driven by pure nostalgia, idle curiosity, or a quest for forbidden knowledge that can only end badly, there are many amazing resources that can help you on your way. I would like to think that the Jordan Sorcery channel here on YouTube and my other channel, Jordan Sorcery Pods, where I interview the people responsible for that history at Games Workshop, have added to the collective knowledge of the story behind Warhammer and 40k. But there are many other amazing individuals who are out there documenting different portions of that story in many amazing ways. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm taking a moment to highlight some of my favourite Oldhammer resources on the internet. With the year winding down, there's only time for a couple more videos here on the channel, but one thing I wanted to make sure I did this festive period was to share some of my favourite resources that have helped me understand and explore so much more about the history of Warhammer and 40k and Games Workshop on the whole. These are all amazing places to explore different facets of that history and to while away a few hours on the cold, long winter nights. Assuming, of course, that you've already watched all of the Jordan Sorcery videos, that is. First up, I'm going to start with a site that I have mentioned in many videos, because it is just absolutely amazing, and that is the Stuff of Legends. This site is a remarkable thing, an archive of miniatures, adverts, and catalogues from a huge period of Games Workshop and Citadel history, with images of some of the earliest miniatures released by the company. It's not just limited to Citadel either, there's loads of stuff on there besides, and the repository of catalogue pages has been an absolutely essential resource in my work. There are also some beautifully painted examples of rare and unreleased miniatures that have found their way out into the world. Some really surprising and inspiring stuff. Honestly, it is an incredible site. Current and future GW historians owe Richard Orklord Hale a huge debt for his work creating and maintaining the site. Truly, a really important work. Another amazing repository online is the Collecting Citadel Miniatures Wiki, a site for collating information and examples from the complete range of Citadel releases. The CCM is a continuing project that aims to create as comprehensive a catalogue of everything released as possible. This is another amazing place to find examples of long out of print and hard to find miniatures from Warhammer, 40k and many other Citadel ranges. And there are also examples of unreleased pieces here too, as well as some breathtaking pictures from the mighty Billy Bunter collection. Both the Stuff of Legends and the Collecting Citadel Miniatures Wiki are fan-run projects that are just all about that passion for that history. And I think we all owe them a huge thank you. Just the gratitude that we have for everything they're doing to make sure that that history of Games Workshop and Citadel and the miniatures that they've made is retained somewhere. Because this is all disparate stuff. It gets lost across thousands of pages of White Dwarf and catalogues and all sorts. So having somewhere that all of this stuff is sort of being brought together is so important. Very easy for this information to get just diffused across the internet and across all of those publications and to be lost. I think I've mentioned in a couple of videos how difficult it can be at times to really pinpoint exactly when certain things happened. I'm actually going to be launching a community project in the new year that will help, hopefully, to document and be more precise in some of the timeline around Games Workshop and its products. But it is a really difficult thing to do, and these kinds of sites have been hugely important in helping me wrangle all of that history and pull it together into something more meaningful in my videos. There is another wiki that I think is great as well, and that is the Oldhammer wiki. The Oldhammer wiki has built an index of White Dwarf content by different game systems. Everything from Advanced Hero Quest or Dark Future to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or the early editions of Fantasy Battles and 40k. There's also an active Oldhammer forum on the site that gets plenty of interesting discussion about classic GW games and related topics. Okay, so that is a few wikis. What about blogs and the stories that they tell? Perhaps the greatest of the Warhammer blog projects is the Awesome Lies blog, so named for the news column in Early White Dwarf. It is an incredible project designed to tell the complete story of the creation of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, exploring many of that project's people, artifacts, releases, and the lost media that influenced and informed its first edition. The site's author Gideon has done an outstanding job bringing academic rigour to that incredible story. A technical issue has meant that the Woofrup story itself is currently offline, but there are countless other incredible pieces of research and analysis that really reward reading, so I thoroughly recommend checking it out. A frequent subject of the history explored on Awesome Lies, and a regular commenter there, is Graham Davis, one of the writers who helped to make Woofrup's first edition the amazing game that it was. As well as working on many subsequent Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay editions, including the latest, Graham has a long and storied career across the wider RPG industry, and he takes time to share insights and tales from his experience on his own blog. He also turns his Woofrup design skills to create unique creatures and encounters for the game for things that were missed or incomplete back in the day. It is always a joy to read whenever Graham writes. It is well worth a look. A blog that I've only started reading more recently is by essayist, researcher and critic AASA T. On their blog, AASA explores more recent topics such as Age of Sigmar and D&D, as well as the deep history of Warhammer and 40k. A recent post about the very early Warhammer Fantasy character Rialta Snow was a fascinating mix of history and personal reflection on the role and legacy of female characters in the setting. The blog offers an excellent perspective on all of that history, and I'm really glad I found it. Finally, there is the Realm of Chaos 80s blog. For many years, this was one of the best places to find details and exploration of Oldhammer topics, and there were many amazing interviews, including with subjects like Brian Ansell, that absolutely have to be read. The blog's founder and writer, Oleg, has since seemed to stop updating the site, sadly, but it is still an incredible repository of amazing information. You may have seen me mention a couple of amazing hardback volumes that were released in 89 through to 91. They were called Fantasy Miniatures, and they catalogued all of the Golden Demon entries, or at least the most noteworthy ones for those years. They are absolutely incredible. It's something that I wish Games Workshop had continued to do. They have done pamphlets, and they have done the occasional publication that does that, but not with the level of thoroughness and just pure magic as those books actually have. They're just amazing. But there is a website that has undertaken a huge project to try and catalogue the most important Golden Demon entries, and it's called the Golden Demon Compendium. Since 1987, the Golden Demon painting competition has been one of the most important events in the Games Workshop calendar, and the number of truly stunning entries is just incalculable. The Golden Demon Compendium have been doing a yeoman's job of pulling together a visual record of as many of those entries as possible, from every event in the world. If you're looking for work from a particular competition, a particular country, a particular year, a particular painter, then the database that they are building is absolutely essential. Okay. When it comes to podcasts, I would love to think that In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery, as well as the GW Films Club and the GW Books Club, are some of the most popular and most important ones out there. But it's probably not the case. But hopefully the people who listen to them really do enjoy them. But enough ego stroking. There are other amazing podcasts out there as well that are really delving into some awesome history and getting into lots of different facets. And not all of them are dedicated to Games Workshop, but they intersect in some really interesting ways. Around for a decade or more, the Grognard Files podcast has a huge number of episodes under its belt. Hosted by Dirk the Dice and Judge Blythe, the podcast reflects on a classic era of RPGs and how things have changed since then. Over the years, there have been some amazing interviews on that podcast as well. I was recently listening to their interview with Mike Brunton, who was an incredibly important part of the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay team and who sadly passed away in 2019, and it was a great conversation, really insightful. It is a truly incredible interview and just really, really great stuff. The podcast has a really relaxed and reflective vibe, looking at the personal histories that the presenters have with the games that they're talking about. And though it's far from being Games Workshop exclusive, there is a lot of overlap in that 80s RPG scene with what was going on at GW that make it really interesting context. Dirk and co also run an annual RPG convention in Manchester called Grogmeet, which I have had the pleasure of attending a couple of times to play amazing games like Flashing Blades, Call of Cthulhu, and of course Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Brilliant stuff. The Oldhammer Fiction podcast is an incredible reading of classic GW books fiction. brought to life and given real vibrancy by Reader Lewis. This is just a great podcast to listen to if you're trying to experience those classic Games Workshop stories in Warhammer Fantasy and 40k and Dark Future, but you just can't get hold of those now rare books. There is also a little section of analysis from Lewis after each story, and it's really, really great stuff. Very insightful. Okay, this last one I wanted to mention, I'm actually not sure on the legal aspect of it. Now, I think this is totally legitimate. It's run by the US government, but who knows with this kind of stuff. So I'm not directing people to it. I'm not recommending it. I'm noting in a news-like fashion that this thing exists. Over on the US government's Internet Archive, you can currently find hosted scans of the complete run of the 90s Citadel Journal. The magazine was always a goldmine of innovative, unhinged, and occasionally totally broken rules and ideas for a whole host of GW games, and it remains a glorious thing to read to this day. It's not, strictly speaking, Oldhammer, given it didn't start until 1994, and given its fanzine-like nature, it's not as polished as White Dwarf, but it still just has bucket loads of nostalgia for gamers of a certain era, and I just really enjoy it. Right, there you go. There are a handful of amazing Oldhammer resources. That's not an exhaustive list. There's loads of other amazing stuff out there. Those are just some of my favourites from this year. I'm sure in the future I'll have more to mention as well. If you're looking for some places to just find some amazing bits of history and if you want to just spend a few hours here and there just reading interesting stories and analysis and perspectives about the history of Games Workshop, or just looking at amazing pictures of released and unreleased miniatures, these sites and places are just an awesome place to go. So, thoroughly recommended. I hope that you have enjoyed this little list and it gives something back, because I have benefited enormously from all of the work that these people have done. They have really helped my understanding, and hopefully, I can help share some of that as well, because I think that these are awesome, awesome resources. So thank you to everybody who I've mentioned and all of their hard work. It's really, really important, and I wanted to recognize that. Thank you for watching and for joining me across this year on the Jordan Sorcery and Jordan Sorcery Pods channels. It has been a really awesome project this year to create these histories, to interview these folks, and I hope that you've enjoyed them. For now, if I don't see you before the big day, Merry Christmas. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery. Oh, and one other thing I should mention is Gsman's Gallery, which has an enormous map of the Warhammer Old World. It's huge, massive resolution, absolutely amazing. It's not really a resource that you would necessarily spend a lot of time on, but if you're looking for the geography of Warhammer, absolutely incredible.